Among one of the greatest animators ever to create, Lotte Reiniger stands in a category of her own. Before or since, no other animator has ever taken a specific technique and made it so completely her own. Her name and the technique of silhouette puppet animation have become inextricably intertwined. As one author put it, to date she has no rivals, and for all practical purposes, the history of silhouette animation begins and ends with Reiniger. As an artist, she was a master and entirely unique. As a storyteller as well, Reiniger has her own distinct voice. She has been described as having the ability to transcend the inherent flatness and awkwardness of silhouette animation through her dramatic as well as balletic movements of the characters. Few real-life actresses could match the expressiveness with which Reiniger inspirited the gestures of her lead-jointed figures as she moved and filmed them fraction by fraction, frame by frame. Charlotte Lotte Reiniger was born in Berlin-Charlottenburg in Germany on June 2, 1899. From a very young age she was fascinated by the art of Chinese shadow theater, and as a child she even built her own shadow puppet theater and would put on performances for her friends and family. During her early childhood she showed an exceptional and seemingly self-taught skill with creating silhouettes using scissors and paper. This early interest directly influenced all of her major animated works later in her life. As a young teenager she wanted to become an actress, and her greatest inspirations were the films of actor and director Paul Wegener. In 1915 she attended a lecture by Wegener in which he discussed the immeasurable potential of animation in film. Reiniger convinced her parents to enroll her in the acting troupe which Wegener belonged to, the theater of Max Reinhardt. In an attempt to attract the attention of her childhood hero, Reiniger began cutting out paper silhouette portraits of the various actors in the troupe. Her plan worked, and Wegener invited her to create silhouettes for the intertitles to some of his films. In 1918 she worked as an assistant on Wegener's film, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, in which she helped animate some of the wooden rats moving through the town. Through her connection with Wegener, Reiniger was introduced to a group of young men who were setting up an experimental animation studio, the Berlin Institute for Cultural Research, headed by Hans Kurlis. It was there that she met Karl Koch, who would become her lifelong partner in all of her animation endeavors. In 1921 they were married, and this cemented the collaborative partnership which would span over 4 decades until Koch's death in 1963. Reiniger created her first silhouette film in 1919. It was entitled The Ornament of the Enamored Heart, and this piece was followed by 6 other short animated pieces. During this time, she was surrounded by other creative and ambitious minds including Bartosz, Hans Richter, Walter Ruttmann, and Oskar Fischinger. In 1923 she had a stroke of incredible fortune which would earn her a place in the history books. She was approached by Louis Hagen, who had a large quantity of film stock which was, to him, considered worthless. He had purchased it in an economy where inflation was skyrocketing, and he had bought the film stock as an investment. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for Reiniger, the film stock's value was relatively nothing, so he gave her the stock which allowed her to create her greatest known piece, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed. Contrary to what most people believe who attribute the creation of the first animated full-length feature film to Walt Disney with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937, Lotte Reiniger actually preceded Disney by over 10 years with her completion of Prince Ahmed in 1926. This film was created in her signature style, silhouette puppetry animation. To create Prince Ahmed, Reiniger cut each character out by hand from thinly rolled out lead. Each character was broken up into various parts of the body: hands, feet, head, arms, legs, and so on, and each of the elements were held together by wire hinges. In this way the bodies could be manipulated more easily for more realistic movements. The results are dazzling, and the emotions, expressions, and movements which she achieved are truly amazing. Very often, in animation history books, Reiniger is virtually overlooked, often only acknowledged with a sentence or two. This is largely due to the fact that she hardly fits into a specific category. One author describes her as having, perhaps similarly through the demands of animation, missed the moment. She began work on Ahmed in 1923. However, she did not finish the film until 1926, and it was released into quite a different cinematic climate, where fantasy, expressionism, and the Gothic had receded in favor of a realistic aesthetic. It was an unquestioned artistic success, but it was not seen as part of the context that it arguably belonged to, perhaps standing out more strikingly from other films made in 1926 than it might have done from, say, the Weimar period of 1923 or 1924. Although it is difficult to label and place her into a definite category, Reiniger almost stands alone as an animator in her own genre. Following the completion of Prince Ahmed, spanning the rest of her 60-year career, Reiniger never again attempted a full-length feature film, and instead she focused on creating nearly 60 short films, usually 1 or 2 reels in length. Only about 40 survive today. In December 1935, with the rise of the Nazis, Reiniger and Koch moved to England, then Italy, and back to Germany. They found that no other country would give them a permanent visa, so they moved from country to country from 1933 until 1939. Following the end of the war, they settled permanently in London, where they both obtained British citizenship. This was the most intensely productive time in her life. In just 2 years, she created over a dozen films. Her main inspiration for storyline came from fairy tales from various authors, including Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm. Following Koch's death in 1963, Reiniger did not create any films for the next 10 years. After receiving an invitation in 1969 to return to Germany for the first time since she emigrated, Reiniger's work was rediscovered, and this sparked a desire for her to create again. For the remainder of her life, Reiniger continued to create. She was over 80 years old when she completed her penultimate film, Thackeray's The Rose and the Ring, in 1979. This piece showed that despite her age, she had lost none of her talent. Lotte Reiniger died in Dentenhausen, Germany on June 19, 1981, at the age of 82. Throughout her life, Lotte Reiniger was a pioneer in her field. All of her films were profoundly influenced by German Expressionism, which was the dominant style during the time of her earlier work. Similar to early Walt Disney feature films, Reiniger's plotlines focused largely on the magical and the mysterious. Her ability to capture and depict true human movements and emotions was incredible. It is unfortunate that she is so often virtually overlooked, but as the field of animation continues to grow, perhaps her work will once again be revisited, and she will be then more appreciated for how unique she truly was.